It's the 14th of December 2022. You're very welcome back to Real True Education, Not Fake News. Folks, last night the temperature fell to -7 degrees centigrade in the North Midlands of Ireland. Quite cold indeed. Now, this is a continuation of the part 2, corruption in the planning laws of Ireland. It is a bit boring. Some people will need this. You might need it now, but you could need it yet. And I just want to read out the newspaper article. Now, in the previous video, 51H part 1, I've explained the law again. I've done this a few times. I've explained it. The SCA directive for the overarching public planner programme, the EIA directive for the projects under it, and the Planning and Development Act, which is the vehicle in which they are all applied for, and for smaller things like houses and sheds and things like that. And what we have in Ireland is no SCA at all. There's no SCA at all. They have a car and they have no engine. The overarching thing is not done, leaving a complete mess from the point of view of legality, environmental protection and everything else. And I've devoted a good part of my efforts to forcing a change on this. So this is the Mail on Sunday. I think it's last week sometime anyway, it doesn't matter. And this is an article by John Drennan, to show to you here, John Drennan. It is John Drennan. I'm going to read it now quickly. The government will limit the capacity of serial litigants, that's me and a few more. I want to protect the environment. And under EU law, you don't have to be living beside anything. I could technically object to something in France, pulling down a castle in France. And a person in France could object to the destruction of a castle like Cabra Castle in Ireland, or other castles like that, or Slane Castle or Trim Castle or anything else, Trim Castle or Monument. You could get a mad government would do it. Anyone can object to it, but they want to stop that. To hold up much needed housing development. Now, on the original, the earlier video, 51H1, town and country planning is part of the SCA directive. Government public plans and programs must be subject to the SCA directive, and they don't want to do it. Now, housing development, as part of its long-awaited plan to reform Ireland's crisis-hit planning system, the Mail on Sunday has learned. Now, it's not me and the likes of me who destroyed the planning system. They have already had resignations for corrupt planning officials in Burplanola, right? And then it's me that's the cause of it, by the way. Now, the Cabinet will be briefed on Tuesday on the proposals contained in the long-promised new Consolidated Planning Bill. And of course, I guarantee you, I doubt if any, maybe one or two rural TDs, but nobody's been on to me to question them on this. So we have 158 legislators and 60 senators, and not one of them will ask a simple question. And I can tell you again why one particular member of the Parliament will not do it, because this person's afraid forestry will be brought into it and they'll have to cut down all the forests. The Cabinet will be briefed on Tuesday on the proposals contained in the long-promised new Consolidated Planning Bill. The new legislation coming on foot of an extensive review carried out by the Attorney General, and that Attorney General is going soon too. So again, he'll be gone out, he'll not be accountable for anything. Will introduce key reforms to Burplanola, which have been mired in controversy in recent months. Not by me, but by the government, who failed to appoint good, proper people to the jobs in Burplanola. But of course, it's the environment that's going to be attacked. It's to see how they can put in the next corrupt ones, and that they'll not be subject to supervision by the public as is allowed by law. It will also contain several new measures to update Ireland's outdated planning laws. They're very, very difficult. Oh, they would test you. I mean, I'm used to it, and they'd really get, oh God, it's unbelievable. And you think you knew them, and you go to court and they'll come up with another subsection somewhere. Drive you nuts. Including moves to limit individuals or organisations from blocking or delaying developments in the courts. So they're going to take away the right of the individual like me or groups to a judicial review. That's completely contrary to the Treaty on the Functioning of the European Union and the Lisbon Treaty. They're going to break it. It's completely contrary to the Aarhus Convention and the directives that we have as part of our rights of EU citizens. As EU citizens, And if there wasn't EU laws, there'd be Irish laws anyway, because they'd have to bring them in. A senior government source told the Mail on Sunday a key factor will be the capping will be capping the costs that those taking a judicial review can secure. So now, you go into court, as is your right, and you claim protection from the extraordinary costs of the opposition should you lose. Excuse me. No, and they want to stop you. Now, under pressure, Minister Darragh O'Brien, who faces a people before profit motion of no confidence, he won that this week, warned the National Planning Authority it is in a state of serious dysfunctionality. Okay, he said the truth. The Bord Pleanála is in a case of serious dysfunctionality. And they granted the local wind farms, they've granted several wind farms in contravention of the law. And they say that's government policy, and that's not government policy. And now I'm going to start, slowly but surely, ordering the taking down and going to court taking down of wind farms all over the country. And the EU Commission has forced them to take down the Derrybraine wind farm. They're trying to get out of that as well, but that's the law. There's no way that's going to change. That cannot change. That's accepted. And I'll tell you an example. In England, there was a plan to put a new town in an area of English Midlands, and they did the SCA. The SCA applies to the plot of land, and the EIA, it's the planning and development is to the plot of land. And in fact, the whole planning acts are all to do with interventions and works to land. The definition of planning in the Irish planning law is works to land. Works to land. So they did the SCA on this whole new town. There was a cinema, there was a swimming pool, there was a medical centre, there was all this, and then there were all the houses all around it. And they did the SCA. There was a bit of court action, got it straightened out, got the environmental report done, job done. Didn't the politicians change? And they decided not to go ahead with it. They weren't going to go with this, they were going to go with a new plan, and they threw it there. As we say, excusing your presence, they wanted to throw it at their arse. Because didn't somebody take an application to the British courts when they were in the EU? And I think the SCA directive still applies in the EU. They haven't cut it out yet. It may be the House of Lords now, which deals with it. Still there. It's good law. And they had to do an SCA to undo it. They had to do an SCA to take away the SCA, the environmental report, for that plot of land and let it go back to agriculture and all that sort of stuff. Do you understand now? That'll tell you how strong the SCA is if it's used, and this is what they don't know. Now, this is the Minister, Darragh O'Brien. He made the comments in a letter to senators earlier this week in which he urged them to support the planning reform legislation. In the correspondence, Mr. O'Brien warned continuing planning delays due to inadequate structures and membership numbers in Bord Pleanála will exacerbate housing supply issues at the critical time in our country. This legislation aims to expeditiously address the problems. And of course, the critical time is they want 5 million migrants in here from Africa, and they're taking them in here by the hundreds of thousands at the moment, as it is. And this is all part of this migration thing that's going on. But I'm dealing with planning at the moment. And when I went up my last judicial review, nearly all the cases beside me in the ordinary court that didn't go to the commercial court were on asylum seeking. So there was me trying to fight off my wind farm, mast in it, and everyone each side of me, and the whole court was full of people looking for asylum. Now, Mr. O'Brien said the legislation includes increasing the size of the board of planning authority to 14. Yeah, so they had how many before that? 9 or 10 dysfunctionals. They're going to give them another 4. Going to add it to bring it up to 14 dysfunctionals. Provide a suitable, independent, objective and transparent procedure to appoint board members. I wonder how that will go. I wonder. There could be jobs coming up there for anyone that has the qualifications and that. It wouldn't be a bad thing for any decent person. But the thing is, if you go in there, they'll corrupt you straight away. They'll put you on the spot, because the first thing anyone should do is say the SCA directive applies. What will they do then? That's the thing. So they have to make sure that whoever gets the job is corrupt enough not to apply the law. Amend the powers of the agency chairperson to provide clear instructions on the actions to be taken on receipt of a complaint or where the chair considers there may be issues to be investigated. No Irish regulator works, that's all I can say there. I won't get into that. Remove the options for a 2-member board quorum for particular cases. So I think that means there has to be 2 to make a decision. Now it'll be just 1. That seems to be what they're doing there. So again, that little protection of having the extra person seems to be removed. Don't quote me on that, folks. It's not that important. Improve the system of processing applications to investigate sites for offshore wind farms. Improve the system of processing applications to investigate sites for offshore wind farms. Yeah, so they're going to put a heap of these useless yokes offshore. Provide in exceptional circumstances for the accelerated delivery of social housing on local authority lands. If they hadn't to do the wind, they hadn't to go to this crazy energy thing, they'd have got away with building these houses without an SCA. I didn't object, and I wasn't in the way to object, to the Farm Waste Management Scheme in 2007, 2006. And I can't see me bothering my head objecting to under the SCA for the housing for people either. Because lots of my friends were born in council houses and great people, like, you know, that's kind of gone now. So I think that yeah, so they're going to provide in exceptional circumstances. That's what they decide. For accelerated delivery of social housing on local authority lands. If it is part of a plan or programme, it has to have an SCA and an EIA. If it's only 1 or 2 houses, it mightn't. Now, the annexes for that, we'll deal with that in another video. We'll have a wiser look at it. But in my opinion, if it's big enough, it needs an EIA. Don't forget, the new housing town in Britain needed an SCA. And it surely needs an EIA. If it's big enough, if it has a significant impact on the environment, we'll look at that again. The Green Party has previously expressed strong opposition to plans to tighten up Ireland's current appeals process. So they know. Eamon Ryan, he was above in the Chester Beatty Library in 2014, and I blocked him when I one door, and he ran round to the other one, but I ran round the outside, and I wouldn't let him out. That is the dog's backside of a jackass, that fella. But they don't want this, you see. See, this is what I'd be doing. We'd be tightening them up. And this is why you'd look at television, you wouldn't see the significance of what myself, people like John Dooley, Pat Swords, and a few others, and there's 1 or 2 I don't like to mention because I don't have their consent, but they're well known. And we're just struggling to protect our little country's landscape and its environment and its birds and animals and all that thing which we love. That's really all we're doing. But unease about the scale of Ireland's planning crisis has increased in the wake of the recent report from the National Competitiveness Productivity Council, which warned that the planning system threatens to undermine the government's housing and environmental targets. You bet your sweet life. You bet your sweet life it's to undermine it. That's precisely what we're doing. We're educating the barristers. I've been educating senior and junior counsels on this law, and I've been proven right all the time. You only have to go into the Court of Justice of the EU and read the Advocate General's reports to see what the law actually is, and nobody knows it except a few of us. And that's me fulfilling my promise made in 2010 that never again would communities be left without assistance. Now, so the rush to push through the crucial planning reform legislation before Christmas, see, rush it, you see, comes as the clock ticks on the current Attorney General Paul Gallagher's term in office. See, the next one mightn't do it for them. A government source told Mail on Sunday the role of the Attorney General was critical. He wants planning reform to be his legacy issue, and I want planning reform to undermine his legacy issue and let him hump off to hell. If I had my way, his pension would be cut for the incompetence that all these screwballs have visited on the people. Even though he is leaving next week, and good riddance, he will be pushing through to the end. In response to queries from the Minister from the Mail on Sunday, the Department of Housing said intensive engagement between the working group, the Department and other shareholders will regard with regard to review is ongoing. That's the story, folks, on 14 minutes. Now, we might actually have a thing about writing to the President and writing to the Senators and the TDs, if anyone wants to do it, to highlight to the illegality what's going on. They did not comply with the binding rules of our membership of the EU to carry out a proper environmental report with engineering, with all the necessary things, with public participation and all of that, in accordance with the internationally binding treaty, the Aarhus Convention, and the directives made thereunder. And therefore they are trying to take away my right to go in under a protective cost order. Now, somebody else told me, folks, they're going to change the definition of a group. At the moment, anyone can call themselves a group. So in Ireland, you could simply say we met in the hall and we appointed Joe Soap as the chairman. That's all right. Well, I think what they're going to bring in, and they're going to have trouble with this, but I think that what they're going to bring in is that a group will have to have a specific number of members. So if it can't be any more than 8 or 9, I'd say that'd be illegal. But I'd say maybe 7 or 8, that won't be a problem. It'll have to have a constitution. So straight away, I will draw up a constitution for any group and give them a template, same as I do it for the access to information on the environment, submissions and planning and all that. We'll have them all marked so that the constitution will include compliance with the law of the European Union and the Irish law enacted and transposed into Ireland. So straight away we'll have the constitution that will hold up and will mean that it will not be beaten in any court. That's the contribution we are doing. That will be agreed with me and Pat Swords and John Dooley and several others, and we let that loose in the country. See the way we deal with it. Now the other thing is, once DABRA changes this law, the President signs, let's say on the 5th of January 2003, you have only 8 weeks to go and take a judicial review of it. And so with Christmas time and people busy, they will probably use Christmas and they'll try and bring it in so that there'll be no judicial review. I'd say they probably won't, right? Now, under the law, if you don't take a judicial review, unless it's on freedom of body, freedom from arrest and all that, once the 8 weeks is up, you can't take your judicial review. You have 8 weeks. The problem is EU law does not accept that it's 8 weeks. They have to comply. If they continue with building wind farms and building houses and all that in contravention of the law I've just told you, that is always illegal. Always illegal. And the Court of Justice of the European Union Grand Chamber ruled that existing wind farms built under the illegal guidelines of 2006 have to have their planning annulled. And I'm working on that. Now, you see the thing, they're going to try and use the time limit in the High Court, but we have already twigged this. The time limit may apply in the High Court because the judges, for some reason, may rule on it. So we'll be all set, and particularly where there's money, you wouldn't believe what groups there is money in, we'll be ready to go on to the Supreme Court and get it referred to the European Court of Justice and beat them there. See what they're at now. They're trying to use the time limit of 8 weeks. I mean, I won't probably have time to do this. And what's more, in the case of a lay litigant, if I go into the High Court and say you didn't comply with the SCA directive, and then I have to appeal to the Supreme Court, that could be 35 days of my time gone. And the next thing, if it's referred to the European Court of Justice, you have to have a qualified barrister to do it. And junior counsels will not, at the moment, go in without a senior counsel. So it's quite expensive, but we'll work it some way. And I already have spoken to groups who are threatened with this throughout the country in various different things. And they tell me, we have the money here, we'll do whatever has to be done. So I'm making sure when I hear those words that they will be going in properly armed up and properly layered up with the right law. Folks, give me a thumbs up, give me a thumbs down. It's a struggle to protect our country from a crowd of ignoramuses, jackasses that are doing everything they shouldn't do and that hate our people and hate its environment and hate our landscape, our traditions and everything. That's why I fight them, and it is not an obsession with me. It's a sport. I enjoy doing this. It's a bit of crack, a bit of fun. It gets me out and about. So folks, Give me a thumbs up if you agree. Give me a thumbs down, and we'll see you back for something else quite soon. Bye.